Well, I am now honored to introduce our Mission Moment speaker today, Dr. Kristin Simons. Kristin is, as her name implies, a physician. She is a gifted photographer, and in keeping with my alliteration, she is a dear friend. I've known Kristin for, I think we decided about 10 years, and she, although she is an amazing mom and wears many, many other hats, her story is going to be one that moves and inspires each one of you. Before she begins, I would like to just remind that no photographs be taken, with the exception of the professional photographer, videographer, and immediate family members. And traditionally, we also ask that no information about Kristin's story be shared publicly without her knowledge and prior consent. But she, before we were talking a little bit before the event, and she wants her story to be shared. That's part of why she is coming up here and just telling you all about what she has gone through. And so, although that's typically our protocol, she officially gives her knowledge and prior consent. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Kristin Simons.
Thank you, Laura. It works out nicely from, I think, maybe just a comfort level and a nerve standpoint. Laura and I have known each other for quite a while, and so that was nice. Anyways, hello and welcome. Thank you for being here and for giving me a bit of your time today. As Laura said, my name is Kristin Simons, and I am an alcoholic. What does that make you feel like when I say that? Today, I'd like to talk a little bit with you about how God has strengthened and encouraged me through that word, alcoholic. I entered Rogers Behavioral Health Harrington Recovery Center in 2006. Excuse me. It is through the help of Rogers, the gift of the recovery community, and absolutely through the grace of God, that I stand in front of you today, 17 years clean and sober. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to share a bit of that journey with you. I hope that I can change some of your perspective about those who battle with addiction, and I hope also that I can give you an idea of specifically why spiritual care is so important in addiction recovery. Before I went into treatment, probably to the general public, I looked like I had it pretty put together. I'm a physician, a wife, a mother, a sister, an outwardly functioning and productive member of society. I come from a Christian home, loving parents, 5 siblings, a solid family. On the outside, things probably look pretty good. Me on the inside was a different story. I didn't go out to bars or wild parties or things that I thought alcoholics did. I drank alone and in hiding. What started out as a glass of wine to unwind at night quickly turned into 2, turned into the whole bottle, turned into hard alcohol, turned into hiding it and drinking in secret. I remember hearing the phrase, "I don't drink to get drunk, I drink to get normal." That terrified me because it fit. I was drinking to quiet my insides so that you wouldn't see how unmatched they were to the outside I presented. I had no idea how I got there. Deep down, I knew I had a problem, but I could fix it. I'm a professional, intelligent woman. For most of my life, I've been able to do pretty much anything I put my mind to. I thought, I can fix this. I tried so many ways and so many times to cut down and control my drinking. It never worked. I felt like a complete moral and personal failure. I was hiding my drinking. I was lying about my drinking. I was ashamed and overwhelmed and pulling inward. My relationships were suffering. My career was suffering. My marriage was suffering. I knew I had a problem, but I was convinced I can do this on my own. And there was no way I could admit to the failure that I felt I was. I remember taking care of a woman in the intensive care unit at that time. She was in a coma, on a ventilator, and dying of alcoholism. She was 2 years older than I was. I remember standing at her bedside and quietly pleading, "Please, God, don't let this be me someday." I knew I needed help, but I had no idea where to turn. I thought alcoholics were that bum on the street or that guy that sat in a bar all day, every day. I had the stereotype in my head that an alcoholic was somebody who drank all day, couldn't hold down a job, couldn't function, etc., etc. I was so ashamed. I'm a professional, a wife, a mother. How could I be an alcoholic? Women like me were not alcoholics. I didn't know how to ask for help. Part of why I'm standing in front of you today is to say yes, women like me, women like you, are alcoholics. And there is so much help available if you have the courage to ask for it. I didn't have the courage. My marriage was not in a good place. My husband knew I was drinking. He knew I was lying and hiding my drinking. He was overwhelmed, worried, angry. He was just done. He finally said, "Get out or get help." I checked myself into the Harrington Recovery Center at Rogers. I didn't do it courageously or willingly. I did it to save my marriage. I entered Harrington terrified and ashamed and a little bit relieved. Part of me was relieved that I was somewhat forced into treatment so that I could get the help I didn't know how to ask for. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. When I got to treatment, I was in a pretty dark hole. I was afraid of what people would say about me. I was afraid of what people would think of me. Excuse me. I was afraid of what I would find out about myself. Somewhere along the way, drinking had been how I dealt with life. I don't even know how it happened. It wasn't intentional. When I was irritable, a drink helped. When I was stressed out, a drink helped. When my patience was tested, a drink helped. When I felt insecure, a drink helped. And on and on and on. When I entered treatment, I could no longer use the one thing I had convinced myself would calm all the negatives. I was a mess. I had become so good at presenting this outward facade of who I thought you wanted me to be that I had lost myself. I had gotten to a place where I had pretty much just numbed myself and was going through the motions of life. So now I felt more guilt and more shame and more fear. I was empty and alone. My therapist at Harrington pushed me, sometimes against my willingness, but I am grateful to him. He had the expertise and the knowledge to know that he needed to help me bring down all those walls and deal with the tough stuff underneath, even sometimes when I didn't want to. It was definitely not fun. It was hard emotional work, but it was necessary. I won't go into what a hot mess I was, and still am some days, but I am thankful to the staff at Harrington for pushing through my stubbornness and my insecurities and my denial to help me begin to grow into the woman that God wants me to be. While I was at Harrington, my mother-in-law said to me, I have a friend who works at Rogers. I'll tell her you're there. I thought, oh, great. Please tell all your friends I am in rehab. That would be awesome. That friend was Carol Jeffries. Carol was there at the beginning of the spiritual care program. Remember, this was 2006, and spiritual care was just getting off the ground. I remember meeting with Carol and having discussions about spirituality. As a Christian woman, this was not a difficult concept for me. But what those discussions provoked for me was a different understanding of what spirituality is. I was raised in a Christian home, Lutheran school from preschool all the way through high school. Yet I had never differentiated between spirituality and religion. I kind of thought of them as one and the same. So it was through those discussions with Carol in rehab, in one of the lowest points in my life, that I began to have a deeper understanding of what spirituality means for me. I needed to look at where and who I was and figure out, how do I reconnect with God at a time when I feel so unworthy? It has been through my journey of addiction and recovery that my strength, my faith, the strength of my faith has been deepened and encouraged. Today, I differentiate between spirituality and religion. For me, my spirituality is my personal connection and my personal relationship with God. My religion is the traditions I choose to follow to practice that spirituality. What many people don't realize is that in a 12-step program, spirituality is integral to addiction recovery, first of all. And what many people don't realize is, you've probably heard of 12-step programs. In a 12-step program, only step 1 talks about addiction. The other 11 steps talk about how to be a better person and how to live a better life. I have said many times, I think everyone should work a 12-step program. I think we would be a better society if we were all better about leaning on God, saying I'm sorry, admitting our wrongs, being accountable for our actions, looking at areas of our character that need work, and asking for God's guidance in our life. That's the basis of a 12-step program. Many of us, when we begin in treatment, feel lost and forgotten. We're overwhelmed with shame and guilt, many times even mad at God. Rogers has the unique opportunity that their addiction recovery program, being based on a 12-step program, which is a spiritual program, they have the opportunity to have the spiritual care team work together with that for patients who are in addiction recovery to work on that concept of what is spirituality and to struggle with that and to help give them meaning for that. Sometimes, and it's not uncommon, patients in addiction recovery will say, I don't believe in God. I'm not doing that part of the program. You don't have to believe in God to be spiritual. I'm going to say that again. You don't have to believe in God to be spiritual. As a Christian woman, that concept was kind of hard for me to wrap my head around, because as a Christian, I want everyone to know Jesus. But I need to realize that the ability to work with people who are in addiction recovery and guide them and encourage them to search out what their own spirituality means, that's just planting a seed. I know God can do the rest. We just need to plant the seed. Spirituality is part of long-term addiction recovery, but clinical staff and therapists aren't trained in that area. And Rogers has the blessing and the opportunity to have trained staff to work with residents in addiction recovery when they're specifically being asked to address spirituality. What does that mean? How do I even define that? And such a blessing that Rogers has that, and through the spiritual care program. For meaningful and long-term addiction recovery, there needs to be an understanding and acceptance of a power greater than ourselves. We need to be able to draw on something outside of us. That's spirituality. I know that when I was in the pit of my addiction, I didn't feel spiritual. I didn't feel God. I definitely didn't see any godly purpose for where I was in my life at that time. It was really hard for me to see God when I was overwhelmed with shame and guilt. Addiction isn't a path I would wish on anyone, but it is part of my path. And it is part of God's purpose in my life. As a Christian, I have been taught to believe that God does have a purpose for all the things that happen in our lives. That can be hard to believe when we're in the middle of dark and difficult times. Believing that there's purpose in those dark times is really hard. Today, I am thankful and blessed that I do see a bit of God's purpose in my messy life. It is because of the dark places that I've walked that my faith is stronger and deeper. It is because of the journey I've had through addiction that I have the opportunity to meet others who are struggling. I can meet them at a place of, I get it. I have been there. I have the opportunity, hopefully, to plant the seed of God's light in somebody else's life when they're in the darkness of addiction. As you go about your week, I'd like to challenge you, give you a small challenge. I said earlier about how I think everybody should work a 12-step program, and that only step 1 talks about addiction. You can swap out, and there's a copy in your program, you can swap out the word alcohol or addiction in step 1 for anything that applies to you, whether it's fear, anxiety, being judgmental, self-image, whatever struggles you're having in your life. Now, the steps are meant to be done in an order, so you can't do a step 6 until you've truly done a step 4 and 5. But that being said, my challenge for you is a step 11 challenge. Step 11 says, we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. So my challenge is, what are you doing in your life to improve your contact with God? And not seeking God for our own wants and asks and needs, but seeking God's will in our life. I hope this gives you something to think about. I am humbled and grateful for your time today. I hope that my words give you a different perspective on what an alcoholic and an addict looks like. I hope that if any of what I've said today sounds familiar to you and you don't know how or where to ask for help, that you reach out. My personal email and phone number are inside your program. I didn't know alcoholics and addicts looked like you and me. I want you to know they do. I also hope I've given you a little understanding of why spiritual care is so important in long-term addiction recovery. And I hope that you can open your wallets and continue to help the spiritual care program plant a seed. It is truly the grace of God that allows me to stand in front of you today, a grateful alcoholic. May God bless each and every one of you. Thank you.